This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here each and every Sunday talking about creativity, innovation, and design. Now, normally I would do an intro about what's going on here with the show or upcoming activities, etc. But today, I want to get right into today's guest, who I think brings a huge amount of experience and who's had a phenomenally successful career in his role of not only driving corporate innovation, but really driving and helping the broader innovation community as a whole. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mark Randall, VP of Innovation, Chief Strategist at Adobe. So Mark, thank you for coming to today's show.
Thanks for having me on.
So a little bit of background for our listeners here. Mark, you've been at Adobe now coming up on 10 years. You came in via acquisition. Was your role initially in the innovation when you first came to Adobe? What's your background?
No, my role was not in innovation per se, at least in the sense of corporate innovation. It's often like guiding innovation of other people. But my role was very much in wanting to make new products. It's what I've done most of my adult life is make new products, particularly in the area of creative tooling and creative enabling, both for professionals sometimes and other times for consumers. And so it's pretty much all I know how to do. So I'm unemployable any other way. So the role sort of evolved over time, but it certainly didn't start out there.
So when you got to Adobe, what was, you're coming in from the outside. You obviously have a passion for products, passion for creating new things. How did you get from coming into Adobe via an acquisition to then ultimately finding yourself into your role? What was that transition like, and what were the steps of your career to get there?
Well, it was extremely nonlinear, so I'll try to walk you through it. But I think sometimes the best stories are nonlinear. But when I came into the company, we had 5 products that Adobe had acquired and also a bunch of technologies. And I had been working as the company founder, but also in the role of really sort of product guide or product manager for these products, and sort of figuring out the market and the customer. And the challenge had been deep, and I had been deeply immersed for 5 years since starting the company and creating these products. And I felt like taking a little bit of a break. So the nice thing is when I started, Adobe said, hey, what do you want to do? Which was a really nice thing.
That's actually great.
It's always a good thing to know. What would you like to do? And it didn't mean they were necessarily going to do anything I suggested, but I said, well, you know what? I think the products are doing really well. And the technology integration strategy is pretty clear. I have a great team of people that know how to bring this forward. So what I'd love to do is actually, because I'm a little, frankly, burnt on driving these products so hard in the startup context, I'd like to step back and look at doing new things, new products and other things, and not just be the ongoing, guide or guru for these products, which is what would normally happen at a typical startup. But I consulted with other people that had gone through this process, and they suggested that, that point of transition coming into the company is really important. And the default is if you keep doing what you were doing. And so you want to try to seize that moment if you want to make any adjustments. And so I did that, and credit to Adobe, they said, well, that sounds interesting. Why don't you take a role that's involved more in our long-term strategies? We're trying to figure out what's coming up in the future, where we should be guiding our technology investments and even acquisitions. And I had never really done anything like that, certainly in the context of a huge 15,000 person company. My largest startup was about 200 and something people before I sold it. So it was an amazing learning experience. And to be honest, I actually for the first year, pretty much fell on my face of being very successful.
If that was your metric, you achieved your objective, right?
Well, fortunately, I think it was a fairly ill-defined role. So, but I wasn't able to achieve the traction that I would have normally achieved. In fact, for about the first 2 years I was at Adobe, I didn't ship a product, which would be the only period of 2 years in my adult life that I hadn't shipped a new product. And it's amazing because you're inside this large organization with a lot of resources, super talented people, an amazing toy box of technologies, all this great market access. But it was really figuring out, because it's such a different context, coming into an environment where the stakeholder is not just your customers, employees, and VCs, but you have this corporate overriding agenda, corporate long-term strategy, corporate brand to conform with. And all of those things are real and important, and you have to learn how to fit all of that together. So it was a big learning experience for me. And I have to thank Adobe for giving me the time to figure it out. I mean, we did, I think, achieve some good things in that time period, but not an actual shipping product. And I actually had to come to a point where I said to myself, this isn't working, and I need to change my approach or strategy. And the things that I figured out during that time of changing my approach or strategy, and the problem I was trying to solve was, how can Mark ship a product at Adobe? How can I take all of the momentum, energy, resources of Adobe and bend that to my will to ship a great product I'm really excited about? And that's about getting buy-in across a lot of stakeholders. And you have to check more boxes in a large corporate context often than in a small startup context, where you just have to check the box for your end user, and generally your investors are happy if the end users are happy and paying. But in a large organization, all the products and things you do have to fit sort of together with the long-term investment strategy, a margin strategy, and other things, particularly in the case of a public corporation. And so figuring that out was challenging, and I had to kind of reboot my process, sort of like Tiger Woods relearning his swing. I had to sort of relearn my swing, and a lot of things that before go into that, but you do have to refactor everything. And a part of that is what actually sort of led to that innovation role and process ultimately, because ultimately I figured out how to do it successfully, get new things to ship that weren't necessarily top-down directed from the organization, but more grassroots up, like things I personally wanted to do that I thought were exciting. And I nailed how to do that and do it quickly and efficiently in the organization. And that's when the org said, hey, could you teach other people how to do this?
So when you started off in the innovation, was it finding really good ideas hidden in the organization that then you sponsored? Were these ideas coming straight from you? How did those, the ideas before Adobe asked you to teach others how to do it, where'd those ideas come from?
Well, I think they were, as much as in my startups, they were my ideas. I'm not sure that any idea is purely my idea. It's always they
never are. There's always inspiration, right?
Right. There's inspiration. You're standing on the shoulders of giants. You have a team of people around you usually that are contributing great ideas and also helping you filter your worst ideas, or the worst aspects of your ideas. And, my constant refrain is I only have to be right 60% of the time with my ideas. But where failure comes is if I am not in an environment where people can help me figure out the 40% that are wrong. And so, to the extent that they were ever my ideas in any of the products, they were the same amount of being my idea, in terms of things I got excited about. And I started developing the business case and the strategy and really convincing myself, as I would as an entrepreneur, that I want to pursue this. And that's a big, important element, which is convincing the company. Sure, it's hard, but there are a lot of things that I might be able to convince the company of that I'm not excited about, or that I don't think is a good idea for the company. There are a lot of things we could do, but I want to do things that are uniquely suited to Adobe and uniquely valuable to our customers. So that's like almost a higher bar than just financially successful or strategic fit. And so I sort through a lot of different ideas, concepts, directions, and then slowly would hone in on the ones that I really wanted to pursue. And I was able to make those eventually, figure out how to make those successful in a large organizational context. And that's when I got the question from other people, hey, could you help other people inside the organization learn how to innovate the way that you personally, Mark, are innovating? And and my approach was really combining some things I had learned from Adobe, a lot of things I had done successfully in my startups, coming up with a combination that worked inside our organizational context, and then applying it to other people. Although initially when I was asked that question, my response was no, I don't think I know how to teach other people how to do that. And then I just continued to get warm encouragement, forward, like, oh, keep thinking about it, see if you can come up with something while you're inventing things. It'd be great if you could replicate and share that with other people. I wasn't sure it was a model that could necessarily apply to other people, but as I started discussing it with others, like it's another interesting, intriguing, hard problem, over a period of months, I started to figure out, well, maybe there is a way to do that. And that's what ultimately ended up in my role in the Kickbox process at Adobe.
And we're going to pick up our conversation on the Kickbox, but I just wanted to get one thing in before we jump to commercial break. The question of teaching somebody else, I had the exact same question to me back, a dozen years ago, and I had the exact same answer. I was like, no, I don't think I can teach someone how to do what I do. So this has been great. Mark, stay right there. When we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation with Mark Randall, VP of Innovation, Chief Strategist from Adobe, and we'll kick it off talking about what Adobe's doing on Kickbox. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to check in with us. Before we get jumping back into this segment, I just need to do a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, Zoom. Zoom's been sponsoring the show now for over a year. Great sponsor, great support. They've got great technology. I am in a Zoom meeting multiple times a day. This is my 5th Zoom call today with guests for today's show. It's a tool technology that I've become absolutely dependent on with my team scattered around the world, so go check it out. Also, I want to do a little shout out. Zoom is holding their first user conference in San Francisco towards the end of September called Zoomtopia. So check that out. We'll have some information out on our site, or you can go over to zoom.us. Zoom has also made available a free account to listeners of Killer Innovations. That account will allow you to collaborate with up to 50 people on a video call. It's a free account. Hop on over to killerinnovations.com/Zoom to find out more. Let's continue our conversation here with Mark Randall, VP of Innovation, Chief Strategist at Adobe. So, Mark, just as we were going to commercial break, you were talking about the work that you did in Kickbox. So describe a little bit about Kickbox, but also give us a little background on the problem you were trying to solve that became kind of the nucleus for Kickbox.
Sure. I'll start with the problem. So the fundamental challenge is one that I think is existent in all large organizations that are trying to create new value for users, which is that the world is evolving faster and faster, changing faster and faster. And we've probably all seen the statistics about the longevity of somebody being in the Fortune 500, an organization. It used to be if you were in the Fortune 500, you would stay in the Fortune 500 for decades. Today, companies can filter in and out of the Fortune 500 very quickly because the world is changing so quickly and the rate of change is increasing exponentially. And so that's something that we are, I think, healthily paranoid about at Adobe, because I think you have to be successful. And so we're always looking at how do we apply our scarce resources more effectively to solving hard customer problems every day. And how do we keep upping our game in doing that continually? It's not just going past the 4-minute mile, right? It's like after that, we have to figure out how to do a 3-minute mile. And so, and that's because the world is evolving so quickly. And one of the problems is, particularly as your organization is successful, you're getting larger. So you're getting more people, larger budgets, larger resources, you're booking more revenue, you're having more processes and systems that allow you to meet the needs of those existing customers. And kind of naturally, that starts to become a drag against, or friction against the innovation process of discovering new things for either new customers or existing customers. So that's the fundamental problem we were trying to solve. Some people look at innovation, particularly grassroots innovation efforts, and say, oh, well, our goal was to try to involve more people in the company in innovation. And I'm not sure that's exactly the right goal, unless you think that that's going to get you to your ultimate goal. We really started with the ultimate goal, which is we have to be more effective with our resources, returning more value to our users, with those investments, which means, and we also have to stay ahead of a competitive threshold because we don't want to be doing Me Too products. If somebody else is already solving a problem really well, that isn't necessarily a market we need to go into. There's all sorts of new problems that are emerging that are high value problems for customers that we want to solve. So it's identifying those and figuring out where is that cohesive customer, what is the nature of that problem, and how do we define it exactly? And then how do we come up with a novel solution that's going to be more cost effective or generate more value for the end user faster? So I think that was ultimately the impetus when I was asked, hey, can you teach other people how to do innovation the way you're innovating your own products inside Adobe? And that led to, initially me saying no, and then thinking about it and coming up with, well, maybe there's a process. Maybe there's a way that you can enable other people to have the same opportunity. I wouldn't say innovate in the same way because all products, customers, and problems are different. And so a lot of times innovation truisms need to be kept at the meta level because there are so many differences within individual implementations or executions that you need to do. Looking back at my own products, there are so many differences between each one. So you have to draw a thread through the meta sort of truths or principles that you want to pursue. And that's what I tried to do in creating this process that we use internally at Adobe for Grassroots Innovation called Kickbox. And now I'll transition to you ask me what it is. So let me give you a brief overview of what it is. Kickbox is a red cardboard box that we give people that actually contains everything they need to pursue an idea, or if they don't even have an idea, it has a lot of process and help to come up with new ideas inside of it. So Kickbox is this tool. They come to a 2-day workshop where they receive their box. Inside the box, it is loaded with a 6-step process that walks you through how to develop a new idea and successfully test that idea out with customers, and then bring that data back and use it to justify increased investment from the organization. And the box also includes a prepaid credit card with $1,000 on it, which is enough money for them to usually be able to go out and do some early testing with end users, not of the product, because that's not enough money to build a product, but to test the value proposition of the product. And that's important because at Adobe, we know how to build products. We've been doing it for decades. So that's not the risk factor. And with innovation, it's all about eliminating risk factors. And the biggest risk factor is actually not that we can't build a product, it's that we build the wrong product,
right,
or the product that customers don't value enough.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because if I remember the timing when you came out with Kickbox, but it took the innovation community by storm. There's been a lot of interest in this Kickbox.
Yeah, it's been really gratifying to see other people. So after using it at Adobe, actually for a couple of years, during that time, other people started to hear about what we were doing. It wasn't a secret. It's just, hey, here's this weird process we came up with at Adobe. And people would call me and say, hey, I heard this crazy stuff. Well, in one case, it was from some consultants that were at Adobe that talked to some people that had done Kickbox. Then they were consulting at another company and they were bemoaning their problems with Grassroots Innovation. And they said, oh, I used to see the crazy stuff Adobe's doing. So somebody calls me and I'm like, oh, sure. Let me just walk you through it. And they're like, really? Does that actually work? Are you allowed to do that? And so I said, well, we're doing it and it's working great for us. And so other people started to adopt it. And eventually word started to spread. I got invited to talk at some innovation conference. I did so, and a lot of people started following up. And really almost as a self-defense maneuver, because I was starting to get a dozen calls a week from people at other companies, just randomly, hey, we heard you're doing this crazy thing. People were blogging about it, talking about it. I went back and we started talking at Adobe. I said, why don't we just open source this? And so we did.
So that's great. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, Mark, what I'd like for you to share is a little bit of your direct history, because I believe you have a big attraction of using Kickbox outside the U.S., but also just the other companies. So share with us some of kind of the results of the Kickbox activity. So when we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation with Mark Randall, Head of Innovation at Adobe. We'll be right back. You're listening to Kill Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we hop back into this segment, another shout out to one of our great sponsors, which is HP. HP has started the sponsorship here the last couple of months. Now I know some of you are going to say, hey, you're biased. You're the former CTO at HP. Yes, I was. But, I've been gone for 5 years. HP reached out. HP is a great supporter of the charity work. So if you've been a long-time listener of the podcast or the show, you know this is not a moneymaker for me. It's my way to pay it forward, give it back. HP helped me start Hacking Autism when I was the CTO. They support it now that I run it as a standalone 501c3 here in the United States. And so HP coming alongside sponsoring the show actually helps provide funding to Hacking Autism. So I just want to give a quick shout out to HP. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the support of the charities that we're involved in, both that and Pioneer Education, the work that we're doing in Africa on teaching innovation and creativity to schools in Rwanda. HP is actually, we're in the middle of updating the studio here. We'll have a video here soon, hopefully. If I can finally get it wrapped up, we'll show you all the new gear, the new equipment for all you tech heads out there who've been asking for how the studio all got put together. And we'll do that soon. So check it out. You can also see what's latest coming on with the work that we're doing with HP. You can hop over to killerinnovations.com/HP. and see all the products and technologies that we are now using here at the show. So, thanks. Let's continue on the conversation. Mark, we were wrapping up at the previous segment, specifically talking about the rollout and the use of the Kickbox, but also of the other companies that have gotten excited about it. Talk me through a little bit about what's been the output on the other end of the Kickbox activity, both within Adobe, but also maybe some of the other third-party companies that have adopted the Kickbox program.
Both new products and new features and technologies we put into products that are customer-facing and also internally facing, new initiatives that have been optimizations for Adobe in terms of our business processes internally. So not all innovations are necessarily external, although ones that people would know about are things like the music sync feature in Lightroom. Came out of a Kickbox innovation team. And so, but it doesn't just stop there because we open sourced Kickbox. So now anyone can go use the same Kickbox process that we developed for ourselves internally at Adobe. And now there are thousands of other organizations around the world who have been using Kickbox. And that runs the gamut from people like Cisco, who came up with 1,100 new ideas after deploying Kickbox to all 60,000 employees worldwide. And they based a process on Kickbox. This is open source. I encourage everybody that adopts it to adopt it to the culture of your organization and not just do Kickbox exactly as Adobe does Kickbox, but really to use the principles behind it and adapt it into your culture. We've also seen MasterCard do a terrific program based on Kickbox called IdeaBox, so they came up with 700 new ideas. Companies in Europe like Swisscom, Liberty Global, which is the largest cable provider in Europe, people like Vanage. We've seen organizations really across all industries, even industries that are not high tech. So it's not just a high tech thing. The people at Caterpillar, a 100-year-old heavy equipment manufacturer, are actually out of their first Kickbox group. They now have in development the first consumer product in their 100-year history that'll actually be sold in Home Depots, I'm told, before the end of the year. And so we're seeing it, across aerospace, telecommunications, financial products, consumer packaged goods. So it's not just a high tech thing, although it certainly works well in high tech. But the principle of tapping into the inbuilt innovation ability, and not only that ability, but also the visibility into the market and customers throughout your organization really translates across any industry. But to me, some of the most exciting users are actually the universities and nonprofits and NGOs, from the United Nations to the Peace Corps to St. Jude's Children's Hospital, applying Kickbox because it's a free open source process into their own innovation is also fantastic to see.
So here's a question. do you see companies using Kickbox like on a, what I would call like an innovation challenge? Let's crank out a bunch of ideas. So it's a concerted effort, or do you see it as continuous, where it's just kind of an ongoing part of trying to instill that culture of ideas and bubbling those up and that grassroots activities inside of an organization?
I think it depends on the organization and what their needs are. I certainly see lots of examples of people doing big innovation initiatives and adopting Kickbox as all or part of that overall initiative that they're deploying worldwide. And people have also added cool things and other ideas to Kickbox, which they share back with the community. I was in Europe a few weeks ago and got to meet with the Swisscom folks, and they showed me their Kickbox, and it was just awesome to see it. They had to translate it because it was all in German. But seeing the other ideas and the things that they had put in to what they were doing, and just sort of the different take and flavor on how they promote it. But I also see organizations using it on an ongoing basis, like particularly universities, where they're taking their hacker lab or their innovation education process and making it, hey, everybody that goes through this is the overarching process we use to drive that every quarter or semester, which is also great to see.
Yeah. In the case of Adobe, someone takes the two-day workshop, they get their Kickbox, they've gone through that one idea. What percentage of the employees do you see that then go for a second idea, a third idea, a fourth idea? Or is it kind of I get through it once and then I'm focused on that one idea? I mean, how many employees actually kind of get bit by the bug, I guess, that you and I get been bit by, wanting to create constantly have this funnel of ideas we can never satisfy.
Right. So that's one of the things that the Kickbox process actually helps with is people that are excited about doing innovation. We end up having tons and tons of ideas. But the trick is, of course, to only bring a very small number of those all the way to fruition. So you have this kind of pyramid thing where you're starting with thousands of ideas. I've had people ask me, hey, Mark, how do I just come up with 3 hit ideas, like 3 big ideas in my life? And unfortunately, the only answer I could give people is to come up with 3,000 lousy ideas. And I'm not smart enough to do just the 3 good ones.
Nobody is. I haven't figured out that. If you've got that formula, let me know, because I sure as heck haven't figured it out.
So people assume that just like writing hit songs or a lot, doing a lot of things that art or other things where we may look at it as outsiders and be just amazed and think there's some kind of magical gift that people are born with to enable that. Really, it's actually rigorous process. Even being a stand-up comedian, it's like rigorous process, work, practice. You start out bad, you get better by iterating, taking constant feedback, tightening that feedback loop. And so it's really, it's a craft. It's a process of doing it. It's not some divine inspiration where the clouds part and suddenly the idea for the next iPhone is revealed to you. It's actually the processes of just a hard slog up a muddy hill of going through different idea elements, combining good ones together. And that's really the way Kickbox documents it. Unfortunately, I'd love to package it all in the glamour, but reality is innovation is just hard work. And the more you do it, the more you fail early at it and get better at it, then you start failing less and it starts becoming more fun. But it's just like working out or anything else. You have to kind of stick with it through the tough wall that you hit on a diet or working out or anything. And we kind of talk about that in innovation. Like you just have to work through that feeling like every idea you're coming up with initially sucks, which is why we teach people ideation should be an ongoing process, not something you just do when you need ideas.
Right.
And, just like, a diet needs to be a permanent change of habits, innovation needs to be a permanent change of habits. And one of those habits is you have to be continually ideating, capturing those ideas, because most of them are going to be bad. There's going to be nuggets of good ones. And that's where you want to be capturing those. And when they get good enough, you sort of work them through that funnel. And eventually, maybe rarely one comes out that you really want to pursue and test against end users. And that's where we put that process in place to go do that testing. So with Kickbox, one interesting thing we've seen, to answer your question, is people that do one red box successfully, take it to the blue box level, actually often become people that do multiple blue boxes eventually on different ideas.
Right. We're going to come back after this commercial break. We'll talk about going from the red box to the blue box and how does that actually get translated as we go into the last segment, so you are not going to want to miss this conversation. We're going to take a quick commercial break here and continue our conversation with Mark Randall, VP of Innovation, Chief Strategist at Adobe, talking about this process of the Kickbox, which they've open sourced. We'll have all the links into the show notes, and we'll share that with you. But when we come back, we'll talk specifically about what happens post that first box. What do you do with it next? So stay right there. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. We're going to pick up our conversation with Mark Randall. Mark, you were just talking as we go into commercial break that when you wrap up that first box, those ideas that kind of make the criteria, then what's the next step in the process?
Well, so it starts out with the red box. There are 6 levels in the red box. Each level in the red box has a set of actions that users need to complete, and it's all self-managed, so it's a very lightweight process. And when they complete the checkboxes at the end of each level, they're sort of broken out on quick reference cards. And when they complete the checkboxes, they advance to the next level. When they get to level 6, they've actually graduated. If they can check all the boxes at the end of level 6, they're ready to graduate to the blue box level. And how they do that graduation is the last and final requirement in the red box at end of level 6 is for them to get a leader within our organization at the level of senior director or above, of which there are hundreds at Adobe. They just have to get any one of those people to fund the next round of their experiments. And sometimes that funding can even be to prove that they're wrong. Like the person says, I think this premise is wrong and the early data you gathered isn't correct. And the innovator can say, great, fund my next round of experiments. Help me specify that experiment. And let's see if you're right or I'm right. And sometimes they'll go get that funding, and that actually earns them a blue box.
So what's the typical size of that phase? Are we talking, you went $1,000 credit card in the red box? Is this something like that's typically like a $10,000 thing, a $100,000 thing?
So when they get to the blue box, it goes all over the place because every red box is the same. Every blue box is different because every innovation is different.
Right.
I think we've just given out our 27th blue box. And the blue box comes with some sort of personal support and we get involved in sort of mentoring and figuring out, well, what do they need? Do they need some designer help? Do they need an engineer to help draft the next part of their experiment? Do they usually it's not money that they need. I mean, they of course need some funding, but the biggest thing they need is actually access to customers to test with, particularly if it's a specialized market of customers, and they may need to work with the sales group to make sure they can go out and meet with the class of customers that they're trying to develop their value proposition for. So that's why every single one is different. And as I talk to innovation professionals in different organizations, this is the perennial thing about where do you take the ones that sort of pass the first gate and look good, look promising, like what do you do next? Because you don't want to just green light it to ship and commit $10 million. That makes no sense.
Yep.
And so it's that middle ground. And the honest answer is, I don't think you can automate or systematize the middle ground. That is where each one is bespoke. And you need to have somebody with innovation experience, not just innovation management experience, but I think actual product and customer making experience.
Right. Yep.
Get involved as a mentor, somebody who's been through the process before inside the organization and can help figure out what is the unique course this particular idea and set of innovators needs to take, because they're all different children.
Yep. Oh, I agree 100%. Because there are people who want to cookie cutter it or just pick something up and plop it down. So then after the blue box, then it's kind of they've got a sponsor, they've got that support. So now it just works through kind of as a normal funding cycles then.
So typically the blue box phase is involved in, it's really the bridge between them working on a separate innovation process on one side, and at the end really being adopted into one of the business or go-to-market aspects inside the organization. Typically, any innovation or new product we do is going to have to fit somewhere in our existing routes to market or customer channels. And so it's getting it adopted by that business unit or that line of business within the organization, and or figuring out that there needs to be a new line of business within the organization, which can be more challenging. But whichever case it is, that's what we're trying to solve in the blue box. Not just that it's interesting, we want to invest more, but now how do we map this into the brand fit, the go-to-market fit, and the lines of business?
That's great. So, Mark, if people want to find out more about the Kickbox, you say you've open sourced it. Where can they get more information on it?
So you could just go to kickbox.adobe.com, and on the site you can go in, it's in your email address that will send you the info. And so you can then download the complete package to make your own Redbox. And we've written out sort of everything we know or think about actually running the workshop, how to do it. And we've done it in enough detail. I wouldn't say it's excruciating detail, but enough detail that then you could take that overall structure and apply it into your own process or apply it into your own corporate culture.
And so then, but you also then ask people that have taken and using Kickbox to then contribute back to that community also.
Right. So they could just email kickbox@adobe.com, and that's where we get a lot of contacts from, sometimes the first time I hear about a university somewhere or an organization somewhere is actually when they hit my inbox saying, hey, we localized this into German or Korean or Italian or French. Here's our localization back again. Or, hey, we made these changes. Here it is back again. And sometimes we also end up, connecting and chatting about the adaptations that they've made, and then incorporating that back into the core of what we're doing.
Perfect. Hey, Mark, I want to thank you for your time in joining us today. This has been great. If people want to track what you're up to personally, what's the best way for them to follow you?
Oh, they can just follow me on Twitter. I am Mark Ran, MarkRan.
Great.
At Mark Ran.
Then what we'll do is I'll make sure to put all that up onto the show notes. You can get the show notes over at killinnovations.com. If you haven't checked out Kickbox, check it out. I've been over on the site. I've talked to a bunch of people over at Cisco and others that are big fans of the Kickbox program. And the fact that Mark, you and your team and Adobe is open source this is great for the innovation community. And so here's your opportunity. If you're looking for something that allows you to get that grassroots innovation going within your organization, check it out, and you can take advantage of the work and all the scars that Mark and his team have gone through in large organizations of trying to do those grassroots. All of us that have been around this dance, we all laugh and chuckle because it's kind of the same challenges, just slightly different beat to the music depending on the organization. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's show. Greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here. You can check us out. We're live Sunday on Biz Talk Radio. Podcast comes out each and every Tuesday morning. Hop on over to killinnovations.com. Blog post is over at philmckinney.com. You can sign up for the newsletters there and keep up to date. And with that, thank you for joining, and we'll talk to you next Sunday here on Killer Innovations.